Hi gang, I'm Paul.
And I'm Joe.
And we're the creators of Recess, which was a show that came out more than 20 years ago.
Long time ago for us. And what happened was, Paul had been one of the creators of Rugrats, and I'd worked on that show with him, and then I would help develop Hey Arnold with Craig Bartlett and Steve Dixon. And we were kind of getting ready for our next show, and we came up with Recess.
Which is our most personal show. It was really stories about kids' lives that really our own lives from what we remembered back in the day.
And also, interestingly, about what was going on in the playground then and is going on in the playground now. And in that way, it's like probably the most important show for us that we ever made.
Most personal show.
The most personal show.
So here are 107 facts about Recess that you probably didn't know.
And even we didn't know.
Tired of sitting in class and listening to teachers, getting homework, and taking spelling tests? Sometimes you just need to go outside where the balls are bouncing, swings are swinging, and kindergartners are running rampant. The one time where a kid can be free. Hey kids, I'm Joe with Channel Frederator, and go ahead and get that kickball ready, cause it's time to take a break and count down 107 facts about Recess. Let's get started. Ever wonder why Rugrats, Hey Arnold, and Recess were all great shows about youthful miscreants? Well, Recess was created by both Paul Germain and Joe Ansolabehere. Paul co-created Rugrats, while Joe worked on Rugrats and Hey Arnold. Paul and Joe have been working with each other since 1994 and called their company Paul and Joe Productions. By season 5, they started using a vanity card at the end of Recess, comprised of a photoshopped photo of Paul and Joe as kids together. Paul got his bachelor's in economics at Berkeley, but then went to graduate school at UCLA Film School. Joe was also a graduate at UCLA Film School, and this is where the two met. Paul's first animation job was co-producing The Simpsons shorts on The Tracy Ullman Show. He was later credited as co-producer on the first 2 episodes of the half-hour series. Paul actually contacted the company Joe was working at without knowing he was there. When Joe picked up the phone, Paul introduced himself only to be interrupted with, Paul, it's me, Joe. This call is how they reconnected for the first time since film school. With Nickelodeon's Rugrats and Hey Arnold under Paul and Joe's belt, you can't help but wonder why Recess was on Disney and not Nickelodeon. Well, after the success of Rugrats in the 80s, Disney had been trying to get them to create a show for them. So when Geraldine Laybourne left Nickelodeon in 1996 and became president of Disney ABC, she created ABC's Saturday morning programming. She specifically reached out to Paul and Joe and asked them to come up with a series idea for the segment. Joe actually came up with the idea for Recess after Hey Arnold became more about the adults and less about Arnold and the kids in school. He would call his new idea the Recess Gang, and thus started the journey to create Recess. Ever notice how the Recess title card says, created by Paul and Joe? Well, Disney didn't originally want to put their names on the screen as to not overshadow Walt Disney's name. However, the company compromised with showcasing the creators' first names under Disney's Recess. When Rugrats was in development, Paul and Joe's kids were about 6 months old. By the time they started Recess, their kids were starting 2nd grade. They decided to make the Recess kids 4th graders, since that would be how old their kids would be when the show came out. Despite being set in the 90s, Joe and Paul intended Recess to feel timeless, stating the playground was something that wasn't going to change in time. It's true, almost every kid has their own sort of old Rusty. The original pilot of Recess was an animatic of the break-in. This meant that it was basically a fancy storyboard, painted and set to dialogue, effects, and music before it was tested with kids. Moreover, the character designs weren't finalized, and Gus wasn't even present yet. Paul and Joe were inspired by the magical realism in the South American book by Gabriel Garcia Marquez called 100 Years of Solitude. They implemented this element by deciding that the further away they were from the main cast, the more stylized and magical the peripheral characters would become. The kindergartners were primitive savages, the 6th graders were actual royalty, and the mean girls were all named Ashley, and the diggers were tunneling towards China. Though you may not think it, another inspiration for Recess comes from Paul and Joe's love for the sitcom Taxi, as well as many other 70s shows. By the way, despite creating Recess, neither Joe nor Paul can draw. This just goes to show that you don't need to know how to draw to make a cartoon. Hear that, writers? It can happen. This meant that Recess was a script-driven cartoon. All the dialogue and action was written out before anything was drawn. After a script was finished, voices were recorded and overlaid with storyboards. Only then were things finally animated. To create ideas for the episodes, the writers of the show would try to remember things they did as kids in school. After all, they do say, write what you know. The writers didn't only use their memories for stories, they also interviewed kids at the time about their school experiences. In fact, the box was one of these kids' stories. Joe and Paul thought it was an actual metal box when the kid told the tale, but after realizing they were talking about a painted box, they went with that idea instead. It also took nearly a month to get the script approved for Gus's Last Stand because the ABC executives didn't like the idea of showing violence in a cartoon. But Paul and Joe really pushed to have an honest portrayal of what happens when a kid gets bullied. Joe and Paul had an educational consultant during the show run because the FCC required the hiring of an educational advisor to assist with children's television programming. Paul and Joe were against the idea of having an educational advisor, but when they met John Arnold and John read them a Supertramp song, they fell in love with him. Don't judge a person by their job title. John actually met Geraldine Lambourne when she was a teacher and got her into children's television. Looks like the entire team was connected in one way or another. The 6 main characters are all based on people in Joe and Paul's life. For example, Gretchen is based on Paul's wife Beatrice, whom he knew as a kid. They based Spinelli on someone they went to school with who had the same name. They always felt that the real Spinelli was the coolest person there was. TJ was based on Joe's friend from kindergarten, JP. In the original design, they called him PJ. I wonder if that's just flipping around JP's name or using Paul and Joe's first initials. Whoa, mind blown! So what does TJ stand for? Well, T stands for Theodore, and J stands for Jasper, meaning his full name is Theodore Jasper Detweiler. I think we'll just stick with TJ. Vince is based on Paul's friend from elementary school, though he went through a lot of character design changes. Mikey is based on Joe's little brother, Louie. Aw, we wish our siblings would do something like that for us. And what about Gus? Well, Gus was based on how Paul and Joe saw themselves. The main students weren't the only ones based on people. Miss Finster is based on a teacher that Joe knew named Miss Jatila. Joe described her as bigger than life and said that she would always be yelling, but the more you know her, you find out she's really sweet. Miss Grokey was named after Paul's junior high school math teacher, Miss Grokey. He described her as a wonderful teacher who got married and took her husband's last name, but apart from that, she is nothing like Miss Grokey from Recess. Because they had such close relationships with their wives and female friends, Paul and Joe worked hard to make characters like Spinelli, Gretchen, and the Ashleys. They encouraged having female writers on the team to perfectly capture how girls really act and talk. The Recess Kids' original character designs were done by David Shannon, who was a children's book writer and illustrator. What he initially drew up was very different from the character designs that we now know. But that's all part of the process, right? Nowadays, TJ would sort of look naked without his hat, but in the original design, he didn't have his iconic red cap at all. Recess ran from 1997 to 2003, but the Recess gang remained in the 4th grade throughout the show, until they finally graduated to 5th grade in a direct-to-video compilation that we'll talk about later. So it's not that they kept getting held back, I guess time just moves more slowly in 3rd Street Elementary. So how old is the school? The first class of 3rd Street Elementary School was held in 1928. If you're wondering whether the school is real or not, it is. There's a school with the same name in Los Angeles, and all 3 of Paul's children went there. Coincidence? I think not. Not only that, but Paul's father and aunt went to the real 3rd Street Elementary in the 1930s. That's right, in the 30s. That's a long tradition. Since the show focused on kids in school, creators received letters from people who complained about how the teachers were portrayed on the series. But both Paul and Joe had a parent who was a teacher, so the teachers were never intended to come off as villains. They apologized that some people took it that way, and relished the opportunity to correct it in the movie by having the teachers rescue the kids from the real bad guys. Looks like the teachers were always heroes deep down. Paul and Joe cast mainly kids to play the main characters because they wanted them to sound like real kids. In fact, Spinelli is the only one of the 6 students to be played by an adult. Pamela Adlon, who plays Spinelli, has also voiced Bobby Hill from King of the Hill, Gunter's Rank in some seasons of Adventure Time, and a whole list of other characters. She also has her own show on FX called Better Things. Ever wonder how Mikey has such a beautiful baritone voice when he sings? Well, his singing voice was done by the late American singer Robert Goulet. TJ was actually played by 3 different kids, which is common with child voice actors because of their voice change through puberty. The last actor to play TJ was Andy Lawrence, who is the youngest of the Lawrence brothers. The original voice actor who played Gus, Ryan O'Donoghue, was replaced by Cortland Mead. But don't worry, Ryan ended up voicing Randall for the rest of the series. Cortland Mead also voiced the lead in Paul and Joe's other Disney series, Lloyd in Space, but he doesn't always do cartoons. Mead played Danny Torrance in the 1997 3-part miniseries, The Shining, so he's got comedy chops and horror skills. How about a horror cartoon next, Mead? Ever notice that King Bob may have sounded just a little familiar? Well, King Bob is voiced by Lane Torren, who also voiced Arnold in Season 1 of Hey Arnold. In the episode Teacher's Lounge, Miss Grokey's boxing voice is done by Tress MacNeille, known for doing many voices on The Simpsons and Futurama, such as Agnes Skinner and Petunia. Miss Grokey is voiced by Alice Beasley, who played Cindy Bates in Taxi, that show that we mentioned earlier that inspired Paul and Joe. They describe Miss Grokey as a 60s hippie teacher that pokes fun of Paul and Joe's liberal views while working for the conservative Disney environment. In the Japanese dub of Recess, Miss Finster is played by Wakako Matsumoto, better known as Kujira, who is known for voicing Orochimaru in Naruto. Recess has been dubbed over in Dutch, Finnish, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Polish, Spanish, Swedish, Catalan, and a few other languages. It was pretty well received worldwide, and how could it not be? All kids love Recess. Recess was going to end after the original 65 episodes, but due to the series' popularity, it spawned 3 direct-to-video titles after the movie was released, one in which they finally make it to 5th grade. In 2003, Disney came out with the first direct-to-video DVD called Recess Taking the 5th Grade. This was a compilation of 3 final episodes, followed by a made-for-movie flashback episode. There was a second DVD compilation released with an extra flashback episode. This set was titled Recess All Growed Down. Joe wrote most of the movie, Recess School's Out, with Paul and Jonathan Greenberg. Originally, they were hesitant to make the movie because Recess was about the small things, and Disney insisted that the film need to have a big story. In the end, they came to love the crazy story they developed. The Recess movie was made because Paul and Joe wanted to do something big, like a James Bond movie. Then John Arnold sent an article about a school that wanted to remove recess from their education program, which sparked the plot for the Recess movie. Viva la Recesslution! Ever wonder why the Recess movie took place over summer vacation, away from the school playground? Paul and Joe believe that summer vacation is just a larger version of recess time. If you're going to go big with a movie, might as well go with the biggest recess there is, right? The 60s was a major theme in the Recess movie because they wanted to have flashbacks to explain backstory, as well as talk about idealism. And honestly, who wouldn't want to see a groovier Principal Prickly? Disney wasn't too keen on using 60s themed music and wanted it to be toned down, but once they started, music executive Chris Montan felt differently and decided to put in more songs from the 60s. The theme from the 1970s show SWAT was also placed into the movie. It may not have fit with the 60s theme, but it did fit with the movie's tone. Paul and Joe also hired one of their favorite bands, They Might Be Giants, to record an original song for When TJ Rides His Bike. Unfortunately, it was cut and replaced by One Is the Loneliest Number. Let's dive into some of these characters. TJ's favorite book is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, but he actually prefers comic books. If only he knew there were Tom Sawyer comics. As famous as TJ's catchphrases Tender and Womps are, they actually didn't show up until the 2nd season. TJ and his friends have gotten themselves into a lot of trouble, but all for the sake of the playground. Their love for recess has even gotten them to go against the rules, and King Bob, who is the king of pranks. He's even referred to them as his most loyal subjects, even though he doesn't remember most of their names. Gus attended 12 schools in 6 years. One of them was named Jesse James Elementary, named after Jesse James, the American outlaw. This is fitting, seeing as that's how Gus got the nickname El Diablo. Ah, picture day. The one day of the year where you get your photo taken at school. But because Gus has moved 12 times in 6 years, he's actually never had his photo taken on picture day until he attended 3rd Street School. Gus has also missed going to the state fair multiple times. Man, moving around's gotta be tough. Gus has lost his glasses so many times that his dad has had to put tape on his glasses to get them to stay on his face. Due to Gus's military background, he can identify any military vehicle. Meanwhile, I can barely identify any of the cars on the road while driving. Gus may be the smallest of the gang, but a senior citizen once informed him that he was once that small too, and then he skyrocketed to a much taller height. He told Gus that if his dad is big, which he is, chances are Gus will be big someday too. We're rooting for you, Gus. But hey, short people are awesome too, which is a little scary because when it comes to power, it seems that Gus has a hunger for it. He has gone mad with power numerous times, from the time he became King Gus to the time he wanted to get rid of all the germs in the world. Too much power can definitely lead to chaos. Spinelli is named after her great-aunt Ashley, the first woman to win the Iditarod in the show, the annual long-distance dog sledding race in Alaska. However, the first real woman to win the Iditarod was Libby Riddles in 1985. But hey, maybe Libby is short for Ashley? Yeah, you're right, probably not. Spinelli may be the toughest girl on the playground, but she does have a fear. She's actually acrophobic, meaning she's afraid of heights. Wonder if that kicks in when she's at the top of Old Rusty. Wondering where Spinelli got her cool boots? She actually was forced to wear them by her older brother early on, and ended up liking them. Despite being in 4th grade, Gretchen is considered the smartest smartest kid on the playground. She probably grew up to be a genius. When it comes to getting candy, toys, cards, or bikes, Kelso's got you covered. Erin Kelso has kept the store open for 43 years, even after turning down business to help kids, and despite Mikey's unpaid tab. Each of the Ashleys have a signature color throughout the series. Ashley A is pink, Ashley B is yellow, Ashley Q is blue, and Ashley T is green. Sure, there's also Ashley S, but you'll have to watch First Name Ashley to find out who that is. You would think 4 girls named Ashley in the same grade is a weird coincidence, but did you know that they aren't only children? They all have little brothers named Tyler and younger sisters named Brittany. Now that's a coincidence. Of all the 4 Ashleys, Ashley T has the least amount of lines. When she does speak, she's voiced by the same voice actress as Gretchen Grundler, Ashley Johnson. Guess that makes her Ashley J in real life. Even though learning cursive is being removed from American schools nowadays, when the Ashleys write in cursive, they are the only 4 kids to dot their I's with hearts. We all have some friends who used to do that. Mikey's favorite food is cheeseburgers, as long as no animals were hurt making them. Nobody tell him. His favorite poet is anyone who writes about peace. Aw, Mikey. Since the Diggers look and act alike, one would think that they're twin brothers, or at least related. Turns out the Diggers didn't meet until kindergarten. Vince hopes to play pro ball when he's older. He says he's best known for slamming a ball all the way to China, but we're still waiting to hear back from our sources to confirm. Prickly seems like a busy guy, but most of the time, he's just sitting there drawing sheeps and houses. If you think Finster and Prickly have been at 3rd Street Elementary for a long time, you're right. They also attended 3rd Street Elementary when they were kids. Talk about never leaving school. Miss Finster has a soft spot for stray cats, to the point where she even installed a pet door in her apartment. Come on in, kitties. Miss Finster has been friends with the Spinelli family all the way back to when she was close with Spinelli's grandmother, Angie. They would have hula parties together in Guam. Finster may be mean, but we would think twice before picking a fight with her. She spends her mornings lifting weights and works on her boxing at 5 a.m. in the morning. Did I mention her license plate reads Da Finster? Talk about one badass old lady. Muriel Finster shares a last name with another character that Paul and Joe worked on. You might remember a certain red-headed baby named Chucky Finster. Do you think there's any relation? Of the 6 main characters, Vince has an older brother named Chad, TJ has an older sister named Becky, and Spinelli has an older brother named Joey. Only Chad and Becky have ever been seen, but it was suggested that Joey might be in prison. Yikes. Corn Chip, Swinger Girl, Hustler Kid, Upside Down Girl. It seems like everyone has some sort of nickname at 3rd Street Elementary, except TJ and the gang. However, it looks like the other kids eventually come up with some nicknames for them. By season 5, Gretchen is referred to as Smart Girl more than once, Gus is called Safety Man by New Kid, and TJ is referred to as Crazy Monkey Boy. You can't win them all. In Gus's Nightmare in The Lost Ball, one of the students was named Thomas Germain. That's actually the name of co-creator Paul Germain's son. Recess at 3rd Street Elementary starts at 10 a.m. One time they turned the clock ahead so Miss Grokey thought it was time for recess and dismissed them early. I'm usually just getting out of bed at 10 a.m. In the School World episode, the show loosely parodied the classic 1968 film 2001: A Space Odyssey. There's even a supercomputer named Sal 3000 based after the famous HAL 9000. You wouldn't want to be late for class with that thing around. What's better than going to Hawaii? Going to Hawaii with your friends and meeting a blue extraterrestrial. In season 3, there is a crossover episode with Lilo and Stitch, in which the Recess gang bumps into our favorite fluffy blue alien. Disney loves sneaking in Easter eggs of their other properties, and Recess is no exception. Owl from Disney's Winnie the Pooh has a brief cameo in the episode Batchelor Gus. Did you spot him? Ever wonder where some of the students went after they graduated 3rd Street Elementary? In Disney's Fillmore, you may see a familiar pigtailed yellow hat-wearing girl at X Middle School in the episode Electric Haircut. We love our Easter eggs. Hate being stuck indoors during recess on a rainy day? One might start seeing things like a familiar famous dog. In Rainy Days, TJ starts having flood nightmares, and who do we see floating away on his doghouse? It's Mickey's lovable pet dog, Pluto. Creators love sneaking themselves into shows, and we love it too. In First Name Ashley, the Ashleys complain that if Spinelli doesn't join them, she'll end up dating guys named Paul or Joe. See what they did there? In the episode Pharaoh Bob, the title is misspelled as P-H-A-R-O-A-H-B-O-B, with the O and the A in Pharaoh switched. It's unclear if that was intentional or not, but hopefully that won't be a word on the next spelling quiz. Another spelling switch up is in The New Kid and Gus's Fortune, where they spell Gus's last name as Griswold with an O, instead of the usual Griswold with an A. Maybe it's the humorous spelling. In the late 90s, Mattel and Disney joined forces to release plush dolls of the Recess Gang. Nice. And hey, partnering with the toy company isn't too far off, since King Bob does have an action figure of himself. In 1998, McDonald's came out with a set of 7 different Happy Meals recess toys, each with a different sports theme. TJ had hockey, Spinelli had basketball, Vince had baseball, Gretchen has tennis, Gus has golf, Mikey has soccer, and Miss Finster had kickball. McDonald's even had a sweepstakes called Beyond Recess. A boy named Morgan won and was animated into the episode The Rules, and he also won a trip to Disneyland. 5 additional first-place winners won a recess-themed party at their home, and 25 second-place winners won a $1,000 savings bond. I wonder if it's time to cash those in. Did you know that in the late 90s, there was a recess comic series in Disney's Adventure magazine? Unfortunately, after Disney's Adventure magazine was cancelled, the comic was never reprinted, making them extremely rare. Disney released 2 books in the late 90s based on the 2 episodes, The Great Jungle Gym Standoff and The Experiment, so those who like to read their stories, get at it. If Recess had such high ratings for its time, why did it get cancelled? The show ended to make room for new shows, one of which was Lloyd in Space, by none other than Paul and Joe. Paul and Joe started working on Lloyd in Space for Disney toward the end of their Recess run, so naturally, many of the cast and crew from Recess continued to work with Paul and Joe on the new show. If you listen closely, you may notice a lot of familiar voices from Recess. Because Recess was part of Disney's new endeavors to make creator-driven shows, its success helped pave the way for future cartoons like Phineas and Ferb, Gravity Falls, and Star vs. the Forces of Evil. So let's give a big thanks to everyone who helped make Recess amazing. Once again, I'm Joe, and thanks for watching 107 Facts About Recess. Who's your favorite character? Did we miss anything? Comment below and let us know. Don't forget to click the bell icon to become part of the notification squad. We have videos dropping every day, so make sure to subscribe because remember, Frederator loves you.